Scooby-Doo is one of the most beloved cartoon characters and franchises in existence. Debuting in 1969's TV series Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, the show introduced viewers to Mystery Inc., a crew of teen sleuths made up of Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and their talking pet Great Dane, Scooby-Doo. The group would travel the United States, encountering seemingly supernatural mysteries, but upon solving them, would discover that the paranormal events were caused by criminals in elaborate plots and costumes. The show was instantly popular, but after its initial run, the following years saw the IP go through a bit of an identity crisis. In an effort to keep ratings up, numerous changes were made, replacing original members with new ones, focusing more on celebrity guests, and even abandoning the mystery format altogether, with each new incarnation of Scooby-Doo moving further away from what the show had started out as. The 1980s would see a new trend in animated television pop up, taking existing cartoon characters and reimagining them as younger versions of themselves. And Scooby-Doo would follow suit with 1988's A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. What could have easily resulted in a throwaway attempt to capitalize on the passing fad turned out to be a worthy addition to the brand, accomplishing the rare feat of recapturing the familiar feel of the 1969 original while introducing its own new take on the world of Scooby, influencing newer entries in the franchise, all the while managing to remain wholly unique. Most impressive is the show has found itself, at times, considered canon in the official Scooby-Doo universe, which is a true testament to the quality of the show and reverence amongst fans. The highest compliment you can give to any new installment in the series, especially a spin-off. It may appear as just another silly kids show, but make no mistake, this was the most important moment in the history of Scooby-Doo since its conception. But what did it do that was so pivotal? And what exactly was it saved from? Grab your Scooby snacks while we look at the show that saved the franchise. This is A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. With every show, a good feel of what's about to be presented can be gleaned from the opening theme song, and this one is one of the most infectious. The song is done in an upbeat doo-wop style, with one of the best lead vocals I've heard in any theme song otherwise, backed up equally perfectly by pleasing supporting vocals. This is also the first instance we get to see of the updated versions of the iconic characters, and while they maintain the general look, cosmetic liberties have certainly been taken. Fred, known in the show affectionately as Freddy, maintains his long-sleeve white shirt and ascot combo, but the sleeves now have stripes on the arms that match his orange ascot. The biggest difference is his once smart haircut is now a short, almost buzz cut. Daphne, who has always had the most drastic stylistic changes throughout the various series, now wears a short new hairdo, and ditches her short purple dress and green ascot, now wearing a pink sweater and leggings, a red bandana that matches her skirt, and white boots. Velma, now the glaringly youngest of the group, keeps her signature short bob and bangs, but her infamous glasses are now exaggerated to where they take up most of her face, and rather than have an orange turtleneck sweater, she has an orange vest over her short red skirt, and her knee-high socks have now been replaced to comically baggy tube socks. Shaggy sports his usual messy hairdo and green shirt, but trades in his brown pants for blue jeans, and Scooby sticks with his trademark collar. When a show redesigns any of its main cast, especially when modernizing them for current times, there's the fear their new outfits will be seen as dated, or such a radical departure that the characters identifiable by sight alone will become unrecognizable. Revamping one character is a task in itself, but redoing an entire ensemble amplifies the risk that someone will end up disappointed by their favorite member's new appearance. But with just the right mix of homage and modernization, they work perfectly. And I don't mean they work well, I'm saying these are the best redesigns for characters in a spin-off or reboot I've ever seen. Not only do they do justice to their old counterparts, but they're iconic in their own right. This would also mark the most important thing that this show would do in getting the franchise back on track: having the Scooby Gang back together. This may not seem significant, seeing how the whole show is predicated on the famous five, but at this point in time, it was the first time in nearly a decade that they had been together in a full-time capacity, and there hasn't been one major release since that hasn't featured the team primarily. What's really fun about this squad are the distinct personalities made up of each part of the group. Shaggy is the closest to his original counterpart, alternating between his two prime feelings of fear and hunger, but is also the most childlike of the crew, loving video games, having a paper route, and reading comic books about his favorite superhero, Commander Cool. Perhaps most interesting is that he's played by original Shaggy voice actor, Casey Kasem. It's hard to remember a time before Matthew Lillard had taken over the role in both animated and live action form, but hearing Kasem again, who had voiced Shaggy going on 20 years, still has that boyish charm about him that made everyone fall in love with the character all those years ago. Scooby is mostly the same too, but what I like here is that he contributes as the group's tracker for clues. Normally, he's just the team's pet and doesn't do much outside of providing comic relief, but here, it feels like he's contributing palpable value to the gang. Like Shaggy, the role is most notable in that it was portrayed by original Scooby-Doo voice actor Don Messick, but it would sadly be his last voice acting of the character in a TV series. Despite being 62 years old at the time, his voice is perfect and is still my favorite actor that played Scooby-Doo. The rest of the group, however, are the ones who have undergone the most drastic changes. Velma is now portrayed as the youngest of the group and mostly remains silent, only really speaking when she exclaims her catchphrase, "Jinkies." The act of her talking being so momentous, it causes the group to pause and excitedly comment on it. She's the tiniest teammate, but also the happiest of the group. It's sort of amazing to see this version of Velma, considering how different portrayals of her have been in recent years. Now commonly depicted as a sarcastic, borderline genius, it's refreshing to look back at a time where she wasn't constantly doling out one-liner quips with a snarky attitude and was just happy, innocent little Velma. But of all the team, it's Daphne who's been changed the most. Her normally neutral personality has been sharpened up quite a bit. Her practical mindedness is at the forefront, calling out the gang when they make a wild claim, and her disbelief of ghosts keeps the group grounded, even directly in the face of ghouls. This was also the first, most prevalent introduction of Daphne's wealth. In shows past, her family's higher financial status had been mentioned in passing, but here, it's one of her primary traits, but not in an annoying way. She's not bratty or spoiled, she just comes from an affluent lifestyle, and it's never rubbed in anyone's face or used to put anyone down. And when writing for a rich character, making them likable is an impressive feat. She's also prissy and prim, into fashion, hating filth, and quick to scream whenever she gets dirt on her white boots. It's good to see her having more defining characteristics other than the girl of the group. And this is one of the first and most multi-dimensional versions of Daphne we've ever seen. In a pleasant surprise, it's Freddy who's the funniest of the five. He's obsessed with conspiracy theories, blaming moonmen or underground mole people working with the government, or trying to replace people's brains in some nonsensical plot. The ideas he concocts are outlandish, and he comes off as almost unhinged at times, but with sweet, if not distracted intentions. His other obsession, though, has to do with the peripheral character in the series, Red Herring, which is a great play on the term red herring, meaning a misleading clue. He isn't part of the Scooby Gang. In fact, he's Freddy's enemy, a curly-haired, redhead, vest-wearing misanthrope who Freddy always assumes is the culprit of every crime. He's a bratty kid who loves to torment the gang, but always ends up getting his comeuppance. The theme song also presents the plot, which is the other crucial component in how a pup named Scooby-Doo helped put the franchise back on solid ground. It placed the reunited gang back to doing what they do best, solving mysteries. Such a simple concept, but one that hadn't been tackled on a consistent basis since arguably 1976's The Scooby-Doo Show. Pup follows a 30-minute episodic format, choosing to do self-contained, unrelated episodes rather than follow any through storyline, but would sometimes split into two 11-minute segments. The episodes all follow the same structure. The members of the gang are going about their business when a creepy ghoul commits a dastardly crime, and it's up to the group to solve the mystery. Though in line with the tried and true formula, there are some new twists to the format. For example, each episode begins with one of the five narrating, giving context of where they're at and what's happening in the story. The narration gives a little more life to the story and also helps to get into the action a little quicker. And this leads us to the show's bad guys. Aside from the gang, the favorite part of any Scooby-Doo story is the villain. And Pup goes the silliest route possible with that, having characters like Chickenstein and the sludge monster from the Earth's core. They're extremely creative bad guys, like the spirit of rock and roll, being the ghosts of a deceased rock star, a monster made of nacho cheese, and a modern take on the Headless Horseman, a zombie skateboarder with a pumpkin head. It's fun how far they lean into the goofiness of the show, including the crimes they commit. From the more conventional, scaring off people to get hidden treasure, to more kid-relatable crimes like stealing a bike. They're all pretty much par for the course, except for one episode that deals with a drug smuggling ring. The tone is kept light for the most part, but it's so out of place. I assume this had to be brought on by the United States' at the time war on drugs. It's played completely straight, with the subject at one point even tearing up about going to prison for his crimes. But rather than breaking my immersion, it actually drew me in more. And I wonder what a Scooby-Doo show would look like if it addressed more serious issues. I think it could be done, and might be a new, refreshing, engaging spin on things. The biggest change from previous Scooby-Doos, and my personal favorite, is how physically animated everyone is now. In past shows, you may get Scooby doing some light physical cartoon actions, but nothing too over the top, since the show is somewhat grounded in reality, which I've always appreciated. Here though, they're able to play with the characters much more. If the typical Scooby-Doo is to find a clue, he might alert and point in the general direction. But this Scooby might find the clue, then have his tail physically turn into an arrow. Or if he gets scared, open his mouth, and his tongue would bend in cursive to spell Rikes instead of Yikes. Fear is the funniest reaction to the show by far, due to how everyone expresses it, and they're always so inventive. Like when Shaggy and Scooby's eyes multiply and their entire bodies roll up like window shades, or how their skulls open up and clucking chickens on springs come out momentarily. They're my favorite parts of the entire show, even though they're brief. And it's great to see these moments of hilarity aren't reserved just for Shaggy and Scooby. We see plenty of instances where the other three chatter their teeth and shake violently out of fear, their eyes bulging out and their mouths physically hitting the floor. The fact that all of these have these reactions makes it feel like the rest of the kids aren't just there to act as straight men and move the story along. You get the impression they're as much at the mercy of the haunting as Shaggy and Scooby. Another liberty the show took was in its handling and solving mysteries. If there's one consistently weak point in any Scooby-Doo media, it's, ironically, the mystery aspect. Time is definitely a factor in being able to set up and execute a full-blown story in that regard, and Pup unfortunately doesn't break from that trend. But it does take it in a new direction that no other Scooby-Doo cartoon has done, specifically how it handles the reveal process. When it comes time to unmask the villain, the gang asks the viewers who they think it is, And while it breaks the fourth wall, it's not in a way where there's a wink and a nod at the camera and that it's a TV show. It's more like we're there in the room with them. And it's nice to feel like they've been expecting us to keep up with their adventure. And it's so unique that each character has their own theory as to who did it and why, but is then debunked by one of the other team members who points out to a clue they've previously discovered. By showing a clip from earlier in the show looking at the clue, and the context of why it eliminates the suspect, and gives the feeling that the mystery is the actual focal point of the show, rather than just a vehicle for these funny kids. The best part of all this is that even though the villain is usually who you would guess it would be, sometimes it's not. It may be someone completely different, but my favorite is the few instances when it's multiple suspects. I was audibly shocked the few times I saw this, and this may be the first collection of Scooby-Doo mysteries that actively kept me guessing. They may not be the deepest or most complex mysteries, but they were actual mysteries, and that's something it can proudly hold its head up high about. The strength of Pup, more than anything else, is its humor. I find it to be the funniest Scooby-Doo show. It's not only the physical reactions, but the spoofing of pre-established bits from the old Scooby shows that strike a chord as well. The sequences where monsters chase the gang are back, but instead of 60s era songs, they're replaced by custom songs about the particular monster. And while there aren't any that necessarily stick long term, the addition of the characters dancing to the music is always amusing. It's unfortunately the same dance move a majority of the time, the Kennedy kick dance, but we do get the occasional variation, and even the monsters join in, and they all have their own unique dance routines, and it's one of the parts I look forward to most. Back to where the disguises and act outs by the gang when trying to evade monsters, posing as hotel clerks or skateboard rental employees, and there was never a time I wasn't amused by them, which goes to show some cartoon gags never get old, only better. Even some of the character tendencies, old and new, are parodied here. Freddy, known for always recommending the gang go separate directions at the poorest of times, will suggest the gang split up, but it doesn't always go as smoothly as planned, with either Daphne telling him it's not that time in the cartoon yet, or realizing the gang has already left him before he finishes talking. It always manages to get a laugh out of me. Daphne frequently calls for her butler Jenkins to do everything for her, from attacking the monster in pursuit, to fainting in fear in her place so she doesn't have to. Jenkins legitimately is one of my favorite parts of the show. His subservient professional attitude, serving Daphne's every whim. I really hope he makes a comeback someday. Velma saying jinkies, but when no one else hears her, she screams it through a megaphone so they can properly comment on how she's found a clue. She also pilots a mystery machine alternative, a motorized skateboard that when she rides, makes her furrow her brow and grit her teeth as the rest of the gang beg for her to slow down. Shaggy frequently adopts the persona of his favorite comic book hero, Commander Cool, and even Scooby-Doo gets a catchphrase, spouting it every time Shaggy makes a bad joke, by laughing hysterically and remarking, "I don't get it." Scooby saying that is something I would love to see return to the character going forward. The show also introduces Scooby snacks in a major way. Before, they were a treat Scooby would enjoy every now and again, but here, they're a delicacy. Coming in flavors like nacho cheese and creamy garlic, it's strange to think of a time when Scooby wasn't as obsessed with these snacks. But this show launched the notion, literally, as every time he would eat one, he would transform into a rocket ship and float back down to Earth. It made me wish I could eat one, and set the standard for him to have an insatiable hunger for these treats. Many of the jokes are variations of the same premises from within its own show, and of course, there are completely new ideas. It does everything comedy-wise I've ever wanted in a Scooby cartoon, and more. A Pup Named Scooby-Doo may get overlooked for both the more conventional classics and newer, more seriously conceived versions of the famous dog, but its quality and importance to the series should not go understated. During its run from 1988 to 1991, it garnered 2 Daytime Emmy nominations for Outstanding Animated Program, proving its excellence at the time and securing its place in Scooby-Doo history. The show was invaluable for being a return to form, and the positive critical and audience attention it received proved that bringing back the original 5 members of Mystery Inc. together in a full-time capacity for the first time in nearly a decade and returning them to their mystery-solving roots was the best road to continue down. It essentially saved the franchise from itself, which had become desperate, throwing everything at the wall in hopes of something sticking, which is ironic since Pup was a prime example of chasing a passing fancy rather than the next true direction for the product. Its influence can't be denied, and there are countless other inclusions that later Scooby series have adopted. Be Cool Scooby-Doo leaned into the zaniness of the individual team members, Mystery Incorporated fleshed out the characters' personalities, Fred's love of traps in that show are reminiscent of Freddy's devotion to aliens and Bigfoot-type cryptids and conspiracies, and 2020's movie Scoob had a segment of the younger versions of the cast solving mysteries. And What's New Scooby-Doo even had a cameo of the A Pup Named Scooby-Doo kids. The Scooby-Doo renaissance would continue years later, with 1998's release of Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and 2002's live-action Scooby-Doo movie, restoring the brand to its former glory to a new generation. But who knows if any of these would have happened if it hadn't been for Pup, proving that the combination of the kids solving mysteries was the best one all along. What is for certain is it will always be one of the riskiest, most important, and funniest chapters in Scooby history, and in reality, one of the best. But that should be expected from our pal, A Pup Named Scooby-Doo.